Now, KMJ's Sunday Conversation with your host, Alexan Balakian. Sponsored by Granite. At Granite, we help growers feed the world.
And good Sunday morning. Welcome into an all-new Sunday Conversation exclusively here on KMJ. We are actually on episode 10. I'm your host, Alexan Balakian. I want to give you a friendly program reminder. We're not only on the radio, but we are everywhere you podcast. We are also streaming the show in high def on YouTube television, 4K, 2K, whatever you want. It's at KMJ Sunday Conversation, again on YouTube. All right, really no time for small talk this morning. We have a lot to digest, so I want to set the table for you right away. Coming up a little bit later, the one person who has decided to break his silence a little bit over his role with Granite Park and why he was interrogated by the FBI. Did Terance Frazier cook the books, as they say? Does he owe back rent to the city? His relationship with Terance Frazier, and if he thinks the city is being discriminatory or retaliatory in their treatment and subsequent eviction lawsuit. So who is that person? His name is Chris Foxen. He's going to join me exclusively in the second half of our show today. But first, never a dull moment at Fresno City Hall. And it seems the special election for the Luis Chavez vacant city council seat, District 5, of course, Chavez now a Fresno County supervisor, this race has turned somewhat nasty, pretty nasty. It's a special election. We've seen maybe, something in a mailer that we've never seen before. So it's very historic, I should say, in these here parts, in a very dubious way. So if you live in District 5, you may have received one of those mailers. You probably have heard about it already. Brandon Vang, pictured on that mailer, labeled an alleged statutory rapist of a 15-year-old girl. And there's a photo of the alleged court document. Brandon Vang, who has ran against Chavez for city council before, running again to win this special election. And there's 3 other candidates. One of those candidates, Chavez's wife, current Fresno Unified Trustee Elizabeth Jonathan Rosas. There's a donor for Brandon Vang and former state legislator who is calling for an investigation that Chavez is used taxpayer dollars to help boost his wife's campaign. We're going to have more on that version of this interesting web of election weirdness, I guess you can say, this week. An investigation did happen, however. It was just completed to find out who was responsible for sending that mailer and where Brandon Vang says that it's absolutely false. And was it done legally? The name attached to the funds of that mailer, Fresno Future Forward. But who owns it? Well, the man who asked to give an investigation once that complaint was finally made joins me here exclusively here on Sunday Conversation, Fresno City Attorney Andrew Janz. Good to have you here on Sunday Conversation. How are you?
Hey, good, Alexan. Thanks for having me on.
All right, that was a long lead-in. I get it. I understand it. And I know a lot of people are processing this because it's, again, weird. Have you ever investigated something like this?
I think, honestly, Alexan, this is a first of its kind in Fresno. Usually the city attorney doesn't get drawn into a campaign finance investigation. And from what I've seen, this is the first that it's ever happened.
Well, Monday you called it an investigation. Less than 24 hours later, you had a letter out to everyone saying who that person was. And then that person filed. So who was the person?
The individual was named Riley Moore. He's named as the treasurer. We have an address that is linked to a FedEx store.
And the reason why they needed to have this listed with their name on it is because why?
Well, usually in these campaign finance investigations, it's the FPPC that investigates. But because Fresno has its own campaign finance rules, the FPPC won't come in and investigate any allegations of financial wrongdoing. And so that's tasked with the city attorney, my office. And so we were asked to investigate because this organization didn't properly file its paperwork with the city.
Now, you were asked by the Brandon Vang camp in obviously a legitimate letter to ask you to investigate it. Would you have investigated it without that letter?
Actually, I wouldn't have. So our process is completely complaint-based. And so we were approached by the media and some others about whether we were doing an investigation or not. My initial statement out was, hey, we haven't received a complaint. So I don't really have the authority to do anything until I receive that.
You know, that special election that we're talking about here is March 18th. It's right around the corner. And I'm just wondering, and we're going to dive a little bit more into the mailer and what you found with this investigation and why it's now closed, at least that part of it. But March 18th, were you worried at all that you wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of something in time for voters to make a legitimate decision?
I'll say this. I was very confident in my office's ability and our ability to investigate this in a timely manner. Anytime we receive something this important, we put all of our resources into it to make sure that it gets done in a timely manner. The timeline was obviously an issue. We had 1 week, 1 day to uncover what I feel that the voters had a right to know, who's behind these mailers. And so when I took office, transparency in elections was something that was very important to me as city attorney. And so I wanted to make sure that we turned it around as fast as possible. And as you alluded to, our investigation concluded in just a couple of days.
Well, I'm wondering, do you think that mailer, now whether you can't do anything criminally, we know that. And this is just really about campaign finance violations, what have you. So within that arena, okay, in that umbrella that I just talked about, was it legally done or illegally done?
I wouldn't use the term illegal because that alludes to some sort of criminal conduct. And so this is, it's an entirely civil sort of investigation. And so what they did was improperly send out what looks like hundreds of mailers all across the District 5 without filing the proper paperwork. So voters would have an ability to go out to see who was behind this piece of campaign mail.
You know, I'm not going to ask you to take off your city attorney hat, but if you turned it to the side just a bit, do you think voters really buy into all these mailers? I mean, how much of that really plays a part into somebody bubbling in what they think is the right choice?
Well, I can tell you as somebody who's run for office twice now that campaigns spend a lot of money on mailers, and they don't spend money on mailers because they don't work. It's all about name recognition. It's about catching people's eyes. And obviously the salaciousness of these mailers caught a lot of people's attention. And so, turning my hat to the side a little bit, my opinion is that they do work. And that's why my office works so hard to uncover the truth behind who was funding these mailers.
Dirty politics?
Look, I'm not going to go there, but I'll say this. The FPPC regularly issues fines and warnings to candidates, usually $10 a day, maxing out at $100 to $150 over a course of a campaign. This was a $1,000 fine, a fine that is, some people might not say that it's a lot, but compared to the grand scheme of things and what the FPPC has done in the past, this is a significant and hefty fine, especially considering the fact that this investigation only took 2 days.
So Fresno Future Forward, gentleman named Riley, the treasurer, does it end your investigation there? We don't need to know who's putting in the so-called dark money. Is it dark money? Is that the right term for it?
That is a term that you can use for this. And so in working with the city clerk, this organization at this point has completed its process in terms of filing paperwork with the city, the same paperwork that the other 8 or 9 independent expenditures, local committees have filed in this race.
As a city attorney, and obviously this is a seat that will be filled, is there like a tightrope you have to kind of work here? Because, the city council is kind of like your boss, right?
They are my boss.
Yeah, they are your boss. But yet you still want to be transparent to the voters and the residents who pay taxes for the city of Fresno. Where's that tightrope? How do you walk that line?
With things like this, with investigations, the city council knew that I was a former prosecutor, a former deputy district attorney, and they knew that at the end of the day, no matter where the trail led, that I would do the right thing. And I think in large part that is why they appointed me to this position, because I wouldn't be subject or influenced by the political winds of the day, that I would do what was right at the end of the day. And I think that they have full faith in what I'm doing as city attorney and what I did in this investigation.
All right. That's just the first half of what we're getting to. Now, we're going to take a break. But coming up, Andrew Janz here, the city attorney for Fresno, once again being called out to investigate whether or not Luis Chavez now committed a campaign violation himself by using taxpayer money or public funding to help get his wife elected to his former seat. We're going to talk about that next here on Sunday Conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back here on KMJ Sunday Conversation, where my guest this week, city attorney of the city of Fresno, Andrew Janz, is with me. He's a busy guy these days, a lot of investigations. Obviously, we're going to try to dive a little bit into Granite Park and some smoke shop fireworks, if you will. But I want to finish up a lot of this District 5 weirdness that's going on, special election. And I should mention, got a text message from James Coos. And Andrew, you may be interested in this. Only about 3,000 mail-in ballots have come in. So do you feel like the investigation that you did that was asked of Brandon Vang about this mailer, it's enough to do the job to have voters make the accurate choice that they want without listening to a mailer?
I think James is hoping that we're going to see more turnout as we move closer to Tuesday. I think that represents about 8% of the entire voting population of that district. And so, I do hope that this investigation has helped alleviate some of the tension around, maybe people not wanting to participate in the political process because it's just gotten too dirty. I think that was a big part of the effort to make sure that this election is as transparent as possible.
Yeah. I also didn't want to get into, you're a prosecutor, you're a city attorney now, but you were a prosecutor then. And there is a lot of talk that, through some media interviews, the wife of Brandon Vang clearly states that there was statutory rape under California law. He was 20, she was 15. And that doesn't matter in what you're doing now. Can you tell that to the public so that they understand that
Sure.
That is not part of your investigation here?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. The entire investigation is about campaign finance, and so I made it very clear to the media and to the public on Monday when this all came out that the scope of my investigation was really campaign finance. I wasn't going to dive into the merits of the allegation. That's not my role. That dispute can and might be litigated later between the parties, but that is not my role.
And again, the document from 1993 that is in question whether he owed child support back then or not, that's probably a conversation for the DA's office.
Yeah, again, that's not a city attorney matter.
Okay, there you go. But want to get to this. You're being called out again to do an investigation, and I want you to help me clear this one up. There's a complaint that alleges former Fresno City Council member Luis Chavez used city funds to support his wife's campaign to fill his seat, and he's done it through newsletters where she's been shown on some of those newsletters very prominently. Again, Elizabeth Jonathan Rosas, who's a Fresno Unified trustee now. This complaint coming from former California Assembly member Juan Arambula and a well-known community activist. They say there's substantial reason to believe that the council member Chavez used funds, city public funds, to support his wife's campaign. He's asking you to investigate it. They've written a letter to you, correct?
That is correct. And I have since put out a statement to the media and to the public that is beyond the scope of my role here in terms of investigating the campaign finance allegations. And, I'm really limited in what I can do because I think your viewers should understand that as city attorney, I represent the city. And so when the city is being accused by Mr. Arambula of potentially misusing public funds, I'm in a position where I have to defend the city, either in court or in any type of other proceeding. And so that is something that is way beyond the scope of my campaign finance investigation.
So it's been a long week, right? And there's some other things that happened during city council that we're going to get to. For your purposes of this mailer, for your purposes as city attorney, you're saying case closed.
Absolutely, case closed. According to the city clerk, they filed all of the appropriate paperwork. My office has looked at it. We're in line with what we've done with other campaigns, other campaign committees. And so we're satisfied with our investigation. We've retracted some of our subpoenas that we were either issuing or going to issue. But from our perspective, case closed. That doesn't mean it's case closed for the public or for journalists like yourselves or the campaigns. They have homework to do too to figure out who this Riley Moore is.
I'm going to ask you to turn it sideways again, your hat again, if you can, because I'm going to ask you a really hard journalistic question here. I'm kind of prepping you, and because a lot of people have said, and whether it be social media or in passing or talks around town, a lot of people think that some of these city council seats are being bought and paid for. I know you've heard that too. How do you assure the voter that these seats are being campaigned on legitimacy?
I can assure your voters that we're watching. The city attorney's office is watching. The city clerk is watching. The public is watching. And so we are going to make sure that if we see violations, we receive complaints on those violations, we're going to act on them. We're going to act on them quickly, like we did in this case.
All right, I want to start with, my next guest is going to be Chris Foxen. He worked for Granite Park. He helped do the books back in 2018 and even before then when the Granite Park was first being married to the city of Fresno. You were not city attorney then, but now as city attorney, and I know you're in litigation, so I'm sure your answer is going to be like, can't talk about it. But I'm going to ask anyway. There's an eviction lawsuit that is pending right now, and I know you have to do some procedural homework there to go back and to see where that will then take a turn on what happens with Granite Park and Terance Frazier. And this is what I want to ask. There are a lot of families and kids that love Granite Park. If Terance Frazier is no longer the person who is the operator, where do those fields go? Will the city let those families continue to play baseball and have those fields to have family fun and tournaments?
Well, I know that the Dyer administration has put out a statement saying that they will honor all existing agreements and to make sure that the kids do have access to the park. And so I believe the mayor. I believe the administration. I know they have the ability to continue operating the park. But in terms of the litigation, you're right. I'm pretty hamstrung in terms of what I can say, and we like to let the pleadings, so to speak for themselves.
What's the timeline on that?
Well, I mean, there are a number of pieces of this litigation. There's a federal lawsuit. There is the eviction proceedings. And so I really honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know how a judge would rule on certain things. We had to go back and rework some paper based on Judge Whalen's last ruling. And so honestly, Alexander, I couldn't tell you.
Is there still a pending lawsuit that Terance Frazier has against the city for $10 million?
Yes.
Okay. I want to finish with this. You have been transparent in your immediacy and your focus on smoke shops. There was some fireworks this week at City Council on whether or not some of those smoke shops would have stricter regulations on where they can pop up in the city of Fresno and how many of them can operate in the city of Fresno. Was it a 3-3 tie?
I haven't seen anything like this before. Yes, it was a 3-3 tie. You had certain council members that were concerned about smoke shops and the activities around and inside smoke shops in their district. Other council members equally sharing in those concerns, also not wanting the city to be heavy-handed. And so it was a 3-hour debate. I think it was a great example of how local democracy works, how council members offered amendments on each other's motions. And if you were watching, I think that you'd be proud in the democratic debate that took place.
But with that being said, is Fresno welcoming these businesses who want to open smoke shops?
I think it's uniformly understood on the council that we're going to continue in terms of code enforcement and us partnering with the Attorney General's office, with Fresno PD. We're going to continue to go after the bad actors. And we've already shut down 14 smoke shops here in the city of Fresno for engaging in illicit activity. That's everything from having firearms, illegal gambling, selling illegal drugs, including fentanyl. We've been able to go after these smoke shops with what we have now. I just think that some of the council members wanted more tools, wanted to give us some more tools.
All right. We got to cut it there. Time flies when we're having fun. Andrew Janz, City Attorney of Fresno. Appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, coming up next, we teased it earlier. Chris Foxen, he worked with Terance Frazier. He worked on the books at Granite Park. What does he think about this huge battle, this legal brouhaha, if you will? He hasn't said much with the media, but now he's ready to talk. We'll listen next here on Sunday Conversation. Welcome back to Sunday Conversation here exclusively on KMJ. All right, my next guest now, well, he hasn't spoken much to the media. In fact, not at all. In fact, he just told me this is his first interview. Who is he? Chris Foxen. Why are we talking to Chris Foxen? Well, he used to handle some of Terance Frazier's affairs with his business side, which also equals Granite Park. And you might have heard Granite Park has a little legal brouhaha with the city of Fresno. We just talked about it briefly with the city attorney, Andrew Janz. So far, Terance Frazier has staved off an eviction lawsuit for the time being. But again, the city of Fresno says they are going to clean up some procedural items, and they're once again going to present their case for back rent. That back rent with PG&E bills and back rent that the city of Fresno says combines for $1.3 million. But what is the story leading up to all of this? That's where Chris Foxen comes in. Chris, welcome to Sunday Conversation. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Why do you want to talk?
I've heard the narratives that have been going on with Granite Park for a good minute now, and especially recently with the rent stuff and things like that. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there and a lot of misinformation, to be honest with you. So I thought, with my position with Terance and being with him for, again, close to 11 years, that I could help maybe clear up some things that, frankly, just not accurate.
Why haven't you talked before?
To be perfectly honest with you, I like to live a little bit of a low-key profile, especially business-wise. I do not like getting into the spotlight. I would much prefer to be behind the scenes, do my thing, and live my life.
I appreciate you thinking of Sunday Conversation as the major spotlight here. When you talk about first of all, I'm going to get this. Give me the timeline of when you and Terance were in business together.
So I started working for Terance in 2007, specifically in August. I started out as an intern there and was employed with Terance through his investment company all the way through about August of 2019. So what's that, is that 12 years, 11 years?
Mm-hmm. And what's your relationship with Terance Frazier today?
Still friends. Yeah. Absolutely.
Every day?
Not every day. Definitely multiple times a month.
Good friends? Take the kids out and play together?
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, if I'm listening to this, right, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. Some people are thinking you're just trying to rally support for him.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, frankly, that can be a perception by anybody, and again, I think if they actually listen to the words that I say and the information that I provide, I think they're going to find me very credible. Okay,
so you talk about misinformation. Elaborate on some of that, would you?
Well, yeah. Again, in the most recent stuff is the rent, and when I remember when that came out in the news, hearing Terance owes back rent, it kind of took me by shock because I remember going, well, hell, I was there for 2-3 years. City never came knocking on our door, never emailed, never called, was never asking for rent. And again, I was in line there with Terance and his attorneys and some of his other business associates when we were negotiating that lease with the city and the services agreement. So I'm fairly familiar with what we put in there and how it changed and things like that to, again, kind of protect the city, but also allow Terance to go develop that site.
Okay, so you kind of finished up about 2019, you said, with pretty much Terance Frazier, right, and looking at Granite Park and understanding what the books look like then.
Yep.
Could there have been a different lease agreement after that?
I know that they were trying to negotiate some changes to the lease and things like that, and more specifically, there's stuff in there that the city, I think this is fairly public, hasn't done, and there's stuff in there that Terance hasn't done. And so I know that they were getting together to talk about revising the lease and taking things out of there that wasn't going to be realistic. Whether or not that came to fruition, I don't believe it did.
All right, so tell me about the day the FBI came in and what year was that?
That was 2021. So yeah, I got a subpoena from FBI and pretty much wanting to know all things Terance Frazier, Granite Park, and again, not just Granite Park, it was everything. It was all his business dealings, any dealings with the city and things like that.
His business dealings with the former Congressman T.J. Cox?
100%.
He pleaded guilty to a couple of the felonies, sentencing not until a few months away.
Correct.
Do you think the FBI was strictly going after Terance Frazier, or you believe they were building a case against T.J. Cox?
I think they were looking at TJ and they were looking at any connections that he might have. And I think Terance obviously fell in that web because of their relationship and with Granite Park and things like that.
How long were you interrogated by the FBI?
It was supposed to be about a half a day. I was there for a full day.
A full day?
Yeah. I was there, got there in the morning, and they said, could you stay for the afternoon? I said, I most certainly can.
So basically 8 hours?
Just about, yeah.
Was it friendly?
Yeah, I would say so. They were very curious about all things, again, Terance Frazier. And again, most of my stuff was about Terance, wasn't about TJ.
So what did they want to know from you?
They were looking for any information that, frankly, any illegal information about Terance and any dealings that he did that would not have been on the up and up. Again, they were looking for, backdoor deals with the city, handshake deals and back alley type of stuff. And they were looking for, again, they're looking for fraud. They're looking for stuff like that. Again, I provided them, I'm going to age myself here a little bit. I think it was roughly about 18 or 19,000 emails from my time with Terance. And again, it was Granite Park. It was about 2 or 3 different other government programs Terance administered with the city of Fresno and so forth. Housing authority. Again, it was very all encompassing.
So you did some of the books on Granite Park, correct?
So I helped with, once the audit was done, I helped do a forensic accounting of Terance Frazier's and TJ Cox's loans and or withdrawals, I guess maybe call them, from Granite Park.
Did Granite Park or the Central Valley Community Sports Foundation basically bankrupt themselves on a couple loans? Were there loans that they couldn't pay off? Because it's kind of known that there was a hedge fund or a marketing company here that had to cover the $1 million.
Are you referring to the lender that came in to essentially prove all the capital improvements and stuff like that? Yeah. So again, they were there to provide funding to essentially restore the park, in addition to any money that Terance and TJ were putting in. So, but yeah, they did foreclose. And again, I think that was 2 years ago or something like that, after getting over COVID and things like that.
So when you were audited, and at the time, this was the Lee Brand administration, Will McQuan was the city manager,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
Correct.
And when you were asked to do this audit, was that a surprise?
No.
That was not a surprise.
No, not one bit. Because when we went and requested additional funds, we knew that they were going to want an audit. And when they came back and said, "Hey, we're auditing," we said, "Fantastic. We're an open book. We'd be happy to provide whatever you'd like."
But they came back and said your books didn't look right.
Correct.
And why didn't they look right?
Again, easy to blame people, but bookkeeper was not on the up and up. But they weren't skilled enough to be in the position that they were in. There was a lot of accounting things, and then frankly, there was just a lot of controls, that the audit highlighted that weren't in place. There was cash systems that weren't quite tidied up in terms of employees having kind of free range with cash at the park and things like that. And again, You do that long enough, and all of a sudden, it's sometimes hard to track back where things are going.
So Terance, are you saying Terance Frazier was not running a tight ship?
Again, I'm going to say that the people that were in place at that time did not do a very good job. And once that was extremely clear from the audit, those people were let go and they were gone. And we brought in a whole new team to essentially correct it.
So the city claims that Terance Frazier and the Central Valley Community Sports Foundation is behind on rent. 1.3 million total. That includes a combination of the rent of over $700,000 and PG&E bills totaling over $260,000. You're saying that's not true?
Again, from the lease that we put, and I actually brought a copy of the lease as well, but the lease was specifically, so let me take you back a little bit too. The original thought was that Terance or the Granite Park Sports Foundation was going to pay $1 a year in rent, kind of similar to the Campus Point deal, if you're familiar with that, with cash-ins and things like that, something similar to that. And the city came by and was like, you know what, we need to have a little bit more teeth in here. And what their concern was is if Terance and TJ did not go and improve Granite Park like the lease said that they were supposed to do, they could just essentially pay $1 and stay there. So what they want to do is they got a study that said, hey, you should be charging them $62,500 in rent. So what they said is, hey, we're going to put that in there, but whatever you put into the park as a capital improvement, whatever value that comes from, we're going to credit that $62,000 all the way up to that number until we get there, and then you start getting charged rent. And again, the language is extremely clear on exactly that. And again, that was the city wanting that language because they wanted to make sure if Frazier couldn't and TJ didn't perform on fixing this park up, they'd get them out.
So how did they get the money to fix the park up?
It was the loan.
It was the loan.
Yeah, it was. Again, it was.
And why didn't they pay the loan back?
Again, when what's it called hit, COVID hit, again, the park got shut down and their income went completely gone. And they worked with the lender and had a kind of a, what's it called, like a forbearance agreement or a, those agreements where you essentially get into them, essentially when you're behind and you're trying to get caught up and things like that. And they were in that, and then they were making their payments. Everything was going fine. And then, long and behold, they came out and said, hey, we want our money now.
Are you talking about a consolidation program?
No, it's again, I don't know if forbearance is the right word, but essentially is, again, you're behind on payments and you enter an agreement saying, hey, we're going to kind of make this up. This is how we're going to make up, almost kind of like a payment plan type of thing. And and again, the lender understood COVID. They understand the shutdowns and the detriment that had on the park. So they were willing to work with Terance and his group to get that done. And again, unbeknownst to me, I heard rumors, but again, unbeknownst to me, they decided to call it even though they were caught up on their payments.
So the city claims, and there's an eviction lawsuit that is still pending. Yep. Do you think you should be evicted?
No.
Do you think the city's actions are discriminatory?
I don't like to get into that because that starts getting into people's heart, and it's hard to judge people's heart. I can judge them by their actions, and I can judge what I see with my own eyes and go, well, it seems like there's a lot of coincidences here, and things like that. So, again, that's going into people's heart.
So you're saying that there's an agreement, and it's in writing. The rent each month is like $62,000, yep. Right?
Yes, sir.
You're saying the city is foregoing that versus them, Terance Frazier, and at the time, TJ Cox cleaning up the park.
Yeah, and we even have emails from the city at that time where it said, hey guys, give us all your expenditures and your capital improvements because we need to know what we're going against for your credit for your rent.
So
it's also been,
well, let me ask you this. During COVID, was that park kept up, or did it just have to go by the wayside because nobody was playing?
I mean, they kept up the park, but there was nobody there.
Okay. So
Well, and again, that was a city of Fresno directive where they couldn't have people there. And again, that was, that's kind of nationwide.
More of a state memorandum. So I'm wondering from you, though, you wanted to come on this show and you wanted to, are you saying that Terance Frazier did everything by the book?
Everything that I've told, absolutely. And again, and one of the things that, I wanted to really spell out here too is how much investigations Terance has been through, because I don't know if the average listener or even person staying up on Granite Park really knows. And, and I can kind of rattle them off here. Again, we had the City of Fresno audit. The Department of Justice looked at him in 2018, presumably at the behest of the City of Fresno. Again, that's my assumption. Looking at financials, which we complied with. And then they also investigated us again in 2019, where their scope increased to not just our financials, but into the inner workings of the park, the contracts, the structure, the policies, the procedures, everything. And again, we complied with that in 2019. And again, as I was leaving in 2019, it's my understanding that the city and Terance were getting ready to do another audit with an independent auditor that was not with the City of Fresno, and that has been completed.
If this is such a headache, why would Terance Frazier, you're friends with him, why would he want to continue having this headache?
I think you got to know Terance to know, because I've asked him that, to be honest with you, and as long as I've known him, it kind of goes back to his childhood when he grew up in Oakland. Again, he was around some pretty tough streets, pretty tough individuals, and parks, baseball, sports, kept him out of all that. And so he has a unique fondness for parks. And, I've asked him privately, I said, what's the number, Terance? If City of Fresno calls you and says, we'll give you this, get the hell out. He said, there ain't no number. I love this park, and I want to run this park, and I want to give back to these kids because this is what changed my life and made me who I am today. So it's not a financial thing for him. It's in his heart.
All right, Chris, we got to cut it there. We had a lot to talk about, but I'm sure there will be more, as we know this is ongoing.
Oh, there's plenty more.
So there's plenty more. We'll be in touch. I appreciate the time. Chris Foxen opening up a little bit about his role and when he was interrogated by the FBI. All right, we're going to take a quick break, wrap things up here on the Sunday Conversation on KMJ. Finally, here on Sunday Conversation, let's get social. And the entire sports world turned on its head when the NBA's king berated ESPN loudmouth Stephen A. Smith. Did you see it? The scene was like LeBron steamrolling down the court, and Stephen A. just stood there and took the charge. LeBron, in a profanity-laced, full-blown courtside rant, left his NBA body and channeled his inner fatherhood, sticking up for his son, Bronny James. Stephen A. kept his composure and later said LeBron thought Stephen A. was verbally attacking his son before he was drafted. Stephen A. later then clarified he was dissing LeBron for putting pressure on the Lakers to draft Bronny so father and son can play together. Well, one problem here, LeBron. Bronny is hogging up the bench. He's undersized and frankly not NBA material. I'm shocked to say this because I think Stephen A. sometimes goes off the handle just so he can go viral. But in this case, he was poised and he still went viral. Stephen A. got the best of LeBron and was on point with his criticism of James lobbing the Lakers to draft Bronny. Anything to make LeBron happy, right? Maybe that's why then the Lakers did trade away his good friend Anthony Davis just to piss him off for a bit. The NBA has catered to King James since day one. So, hey, LeBron, your job here as a dad, give your son a pep talk. Let the naysayers fuel his game, his fire, because bulletin board material in sports will always be the greatest equalizer. And that's my time. This is KMJ Sunday Conversation. See you next week.